Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are having a wonderful day. And it's time for class to start. Good afternoon, Raptor Thumbs. I hope you're doing well. Did I freeze? No, we're good. Alright. As I mentioned on my announcement... Ooh, I feel like the music on my side is a bit loud. I'm gonna lower that. Yeah, so like I mentioned on Twitter, today's lesson, I'm gonna take a step back. I feel like last week, I sort of got into stuff that was a bit over the heads of some people in the sense that it's not really the kind of stuff that's really accessible if you haven't been following along with the lessons. Oh, you've seen me for ages, but this is the first time you've been able to catch a stream? Well, I'm glad you could stop by. This is a pretty good stream, I'm gonna say. I think it'll be pretty good as an introductory sort of thing to help you familiarize yourself with some words and some terms and the lettering system. Okigenyo to you too, Reina. So, today what I want to focus on... Welcome to the classroom. As we get started, I mentioned this before weeks ago on my first stream for this, on my introductory stream. We talked about the three different kinds of writing systems, and I'm going to refresh everyone's memories again. We have hiragana, we have katakana, and we have kanji. So for those of you who don't know, who are completely new to the language, who haven't looked up anything on this yet, hiragana and katakana are both alphabetic systems, or I think there's a specific word that you would use since they represent sounds instead of letters. But these essentially make up the characters in the language. These make up the phonetics. Syllabary, that's the word. Syllabary, as Spuds has said. Syllabary. So, what kanji is, think of it like how we talk about English, right? We have the alphabet, we have A through Z, but words are only words when we put letters in a specific order. Kanji is the same way. Yeah. Kana. The difference being that hiragana is used for typical, like, Japanese vocabulary words that are native to Japan, while katakana is used for words that are usually loan words. There are some times that I see it used as sort of like emphasis. Sometimes I've seen it used for like maybe like foreigners speaking the language in some comics that I've read. And good evening, Ofi? Is that how you read that? Good evening. So again, kanji is essentially the words. And the length of kanji, the way we read it, can vary drastically. Sometimes a kanji can be read as a single syllable. Sometimes it's two, sometimes it's three. And it just, again, just like in English, it depends on the word. So, again, like I said, I want to start this by introducing Shadow Yukino. Thanks for joining the classroom. We're about to get started with our first set of kanji. And yeah, kanji is very intimidating to start learning. That's why I want to approach this from essentially a first grade level. And I want to approach this to make this as understandable as possible. So I'm going to write all these words out, both in Japanese and their English counterparts in the romaji. So if I'm going to talk about Japanese, I'm going to introduce two kanji first that you may be familiar with. The first one, this. Does anybody in the chat know what this is? Thank you for the host. I appreciate it. Does anybody know what either of these two kanjis represent in the chat? Correct. One of the readings for this kanji here is he. Very good. These two kanji, this is sun or day. Day, sun. And this is book. Sometimes it's origin. They have different meanings, sort of like how we have words in our language that have different meanings depending on the context. And what's very, very, very important to learn right away, what's very important to understand, is that these words have multiple readings depending on the context they're used in, and depending on, like, if you're using it as its own singular word. So you'd think, right? It's actually what this together means. What these together actually mean. It was said in the chat earlier as well. Nihon, or as we would say in English, Japan. So these are the characters that they use in order to represent Japan. So if you ever recognize that, you know that you're looking about something that is Japanese. And like I was saying, all kanji have two specific types of readings that we call them. Obviously, we can have more than just one of each of these, but let's start with the basics here. We have two specific kinds of readings we call Kunyomi and Onnyomi. And what this is, as many of you may know or may not know, kanji as a system, these characters came from China. They borrowed their writing system, and by borrowing their writing system, they also borrowed the pronunciation of these words. Country's name, what it looks like. Right. Like they call themselves the land of the rising sun. So it's sort of like the sunrise is what they're representing with that name. So let's talk about this, the different pronunciations. And I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples. I don't want you to focus too hard on the other kanji that I throw out here, but rather just to see sort of the context that these different kanji can be used in. So first off, what the difference between Kunyomi and Onyomi is. Kunyomi is sort of the traditional Japanese reading. This is sort of like what they repurposed the kanji to be read as. I'll label it like that. And Onyomi is the traditional Chinese reading. So a lot of these words, the original pronunciations, come from Chinese. And I'm just gonna throw a couple of examples out here. I don't want to throw like all of them at like the whole dictionary, because there are definitely some readings that get used more often than others. So Onnyomi, there's actually two interpretations of day, and that would be Nichi. So if any of you in the chat have ever heard of the anime Nichijou, Nichi, the first kanji in that title is day. And as you probably know if you've watched the anime, Nichijou is basically ordinary life. Basically, why am I forgetting what Jo is? I'm gonna retype that in before I say something wrong and kind of look foolish. So give me a second here. Sorry about this. I don't want to say things that are wrong, but I believe Jo. Want to make sure I don't say anything wrong here. Feels like I'm teaching in the academy. Sometimes you want to say things, but you're not fully sure, and then it comes out of your mouth, and you're like, I should double check before I tell everyone the wrong thing. Yeah, so like the kanji that they use is day, and the kanji that they use for jo is like constant. So it's like the constant days, like the same day over and over again, which the simple translation is daily life, nichijo. So that's one of the readings, Nichi. The other one, oh, I was looking at the wrong screen, is Jitsu. So what Jitsu is, the reading, I see this one used as well. I think the most recent one that I learned was when you're saying that things happen multiple days in a row, or every day something is happening, we call it, we say renjitsu, or so in this case here, this kanji here, and I'm gonna just throw these out. I don't expect you to remember any of the kanji that I don't explicitly label. But like here, this vocabulary word here, renjitsu, means every day or day by day. So that's just to show you an example of sort of where you would see that reading. So the original Chinese reading for sun or day had two different readings, and again, that's context-based. When you study kanji, you'll sort of see patterns in where certain readings come up, and the more you really delve into the material, the more you'll start to notice those patterns. Now, Kunyomi is a Japanese reading. Like, when you're saying, like, you're just saying the word day to say it like, you're gonna go on that day. It's just E. Dangun, thank you for joining the classroom. So, like, if you think about that anime, Anohana, the full title of it, the first two words are Anohi, which would be, if you remember, if you were here for those lessons that I did on Hosoado, when I say Anohi, that's that day. Which comes from that part of the title is from the title being translated to, we can't remember the name of the flower that we saw on that day. Anohi. A lot of times, very oftentimes, aside from a few exceptions from these introductory kanji, most words, when you use them individually, you'll be saying their kunyomi reading. Like, when you say you're going to take a drink of water, you're not going to say, you're not going to say, sui o nomimasu. You'll say, mizu o nomimasu. And we'll get into that as we go through more words, but as a typical rule of thumb, aside from like counting numbers and a couple of other very early grade 1 kanji, you're typically going to be saying the words based on their kunyomi reading. So, he. Am I going a bit too fast, or does anybody have any questions so far? Anyways, so that's day. Those are some different readings that you'll see for this symbol here. For hi, nichi, jitsu, represents day or sun. Very similar in the sense that the sun will be up when it's daytime, but also it refers to just the cycle of time, the 24-hour period. This one's a bit trickier though, because I know I literally just said that we always go with the Kunyomi reading, but with this kanji here, the way you read it usually has a different meaning. At least from what I've experienced, whenever you're referring to books, the Onyomi reading is, like we have here, Hon. And Nihon is an example of that. While the Kunyomi reading of this is Moto. And typically when you say Moto, the context there is usually when you're talking about the origin of something. As far as from what I've recognized, I want to look up some actual vocab words here because I just want to make sure I can pull up some good examples with book. Oh yeah, that's why. I see. It is nice. Even though I've gone through these initial kanji so many times, it's always helpful for me to also review a lot of the basics. And I'm even seeing a lot of things that I typically don't see. Like, for example, with this here, a common word that uses this character is Hon. Oh, Honto, which you hear a lot in TV shows. Honto ni? Really? Like, seriously? Honto? And that's how that's written out. Hon Mono. Let's see what other words that I know. Oh yeah, another case where we use the Hon reading. This one is a little bit of a common kanji, but also you don't learn this until a bit later unless you're like using wanikani. This one is Hon Mono. So this means Hon Mono. I wrote it backwards, didn't I? You're right. My mistake. I'm gonna erase that. No one saw that. We can cut the clip there. I'll make sure to change that when I upload the VOD to YouTube. Honto. And Hon Mono. This is real thing. Or like the real deal, you know? So when you say Hon Mono, it means like it's right, Akio, it's the real deal. I don't know how many of you guys watch like Hololive or Hollow Stars, but I thought it was funny the other day. I was watching Astel play Apex, and his name was just it was a Yago, and then in parentheses Hon Mono. So he was just pretending to be the real Yago. And yeah, kanji is hard. It's what it is that when we think about like the language that we speak, we think like we just put our letters together and it gives us words. But in Japanese, we have so many different pictures and images to remember and to attach an idea to. But I said this before also on my first lesson. There's this whole like paragraph thing. I don't know if I have it in my layers here. I think I might have deleted it a long time ago. Yeah. But like it was that whole thing where it's a paragraph that even if your characters are all written with jumbled characters in the middle of them, that you can sort of recognize what the word is still because we can recognize words sort of by their shape as well. And that's sort of what I relate learning kanji to. When I find a word that I don't know, and I can't really break it down by its roots, I really don't have anything to do but to defer to a dictionary. And it's the same thing when I'm learning new kanji and reading posts and reading things in Japanese. Sometimes you just have to go to the dictionary for every other word, because you're learning still. So let's take a look at the next set of kanji I want to talk about here. Yeah, that's what I mean. If all the letters are mixed up except for the first and last ones, you typically can read it. But there's also some other catches with that too, like depending on how many letters in that word have go from like top to bottom instead of middle to bottom. That also affects whether or not you can read it. And I think there were some other studies and specific jumblings that made that sort of illustrated that difficulty. But regardless, the next kanji I want to talk about, and it's going to be weird for a second, but bear with me here, because I want to talk about this because it seems like an odd concept to get into, an odd sort of word for it to be the first things that students learn about. And I want to see if anyone can actually name why I'm picking these first. I want to see those of you who are familiar with these early kanji. See if you can tell what the reasoning behind what I'm picking here is. And see if you can decipher my handwriting. If I don't draw this incorrectly. Thursday. Good. They are the days of the week. So, for those of you who don't know, these characters here represent the days of the week, and actually let me finish writing them out. I'm actually doing this off of memory, but I might have to look back. It's that, and then... So these are all related as the days of the week. But alternatively, does anyone in the chat know what these also represent? Ooh, my right foot went numb. So Reina said the first one. This is moon. And I'm actually going to write this like this. Kun On. Just to sort of give a divider here, they're the elements. Moon is... Let me just make sure I have this right here. Tsuki is the Kunyomi. Tsuki ga kirei. Or the moon is beautiful tonight. Tsuki. But the Onyomi reading for this is... Getsu. And is there another reading? Gatsu, yeah. So, I'm just gonna stick with these. Tsuki is when you're referring to the moon. Like, if you're looking up in the sky and pointing up at it, that's the moon. While Getsu, if you think about it, the months in a year pass by in the same amount of time, pretty much, give or take a few days, as the cycle of the moon. So it makes sense that the word they use for moon also is the word for month. So, as a moon cycle passes, Getsu. So, like, if I say this is she, and like I said earlier, Gatsu. Gatsu and Getsu, usually, as we refer to the months, they actually say Gatsu more, but either reading is an appropriate reading. Gatsu. Anybody know what this means? We know that this is the character for 4, and this is the character for moon or month. What would Shigatsu be? April. April. Like a good anime, Shigatsu wa Kimi no Uso, or Your Lie in April. Shigatsu is April. Sangatsu, 3-month, would be March, and so on. For the most part, the 12 months are really just their number, and then the word month. March comes in like a lion, right? That's what I was thinking when I said that. So the first day of the week, and I'm going to write this kanji out too, just because, you know, to introduce it, is going to be Getsu. Oh, this is going to be so hard to draw. This is such a small kanji. Do I have the space to write this? That's a question. I think I have the space. This is going to be one kanji here, everything that I write right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. That works, right? That's stroke order. Yo B. Yo is definitely a mid-boss. This is Getsu Yo B. And again, you could see the kanji for day is coming back here. So this is moon, weekday, or Monday. This kanji here in the middle represents just the weekdays in general. And this represents days. So Yobi is weekday. Getsu Yobi is Monday. Here, the next kanji we have is fire. And fire... Make sure. I'm actually doing this all off my phone, pulling up each of the kanji. Just going through the grade 1. So they're not in a very reasonable order, so I might be going through a couple pages at a time to pull this one out. So what else is new as a teacher? Why is it on the last page? There we go. So fire is Hi. For those of you who follow Hololive, like that song Hi no Tori, bird of fire. Hi, and then no is that particle, and Tori is bird. So firebird. Hi is how we would refer to a fire as like a fire. Like kono hi, that fire. The Onnyomi, the Chinese reading for this is... Oh, that looks like the katakana version. Is just... Ka. So fire is read as... I. Normally, and used in a lot of like compound words, you'll see it used as ka. So, let's see. In this case here, If I were to say Tuesday, it would be Kayobi. And that would look like this. I hope I can write this with enough space. Let's see. Yo. Maybe I'll be able to not make this one look super huge this time. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is Ha Yo Bi. That's a good way to memorize it. We didn't talk about that kanji yet, but right. This kanji here represents person, and so a good way to remember what fire is seeing these two dash marks as someone being on fire. That's fire. And right for this next part, I'm just gonna go through the readings here. You can you can surmise that it's gonna follow the same pattern. Getsuyobi, Kaiobi. This is water. I always think it's funny, like, you think about how the weekdays are listed here, like Moon Day, Fire Day, Water Day. The Kun Nyomi reading for this is Mizu. And actually, let me write these out here. Tsuki, like Tsukihime. This is he. This is Mizu. The Onyomi is Sui. Why did I forget how to write the I? So Sui. So if you were to say Wednesday, it would be Suiyobi. Getsuyobi, Kaiobi, Suiyobi. So they introduce the elements to the students, to like first graders, because that's how they tell what the day of the week is. Which I think is kind of cool compared to at least like in English, what we have here. We have water. Then here, this is wood. So Thursday is wood day. That one, I always mix this one up between the Onyomi and Kunyomi here. Just make sure. It's Kiyobi. Or not, it's not Kiyobi. Ki is the Kunyomi reading. While the Onyomi reading is Moku. Sui. Let me just write these out here. Ki. This is gold, which I relate to that. For a lot of people, you get paid on Friday. For a lot of people, Friday's like the best day of the week. So this is Kina, I believe. I know one of the readings is Kin. Yes. So the Onyomi reading, when we say Friday, we say Kinyobi. While the actual, when you're referring to money or gold, it would be Hane. Why did I write it on Romaji first? I didn't want to do that. Hane. And I'm doing this too because I want you guys to be able to also, if you're not familiar with the kana, with hiragana, I want this to sort of help serve as a way to recognize the characters here. So as I write these down, if you're taking notes, you can see what hiragana characters correspond to each letters. 4 Norse gods, 2 celestial bodies, and 1 Roman god. You're right. And then here, right, down here, this is the kanji for person. Here, this is dirt, or earth, actually. Earth or dirt. And this is, let's see, the text box appeared, and it took me to a page I didn't want to be in. Please stop. I would like to just scroll through the first grade kanji that I'm struggling with right now. Do it, pull it up. Why couldn't this be in any sort of sensible order? Yeah. So for dirt, the word is tsuchi. Yes. Correct, Reina. And the onyomi for this is go. So Saturday would be doyobi. I'm glad to hear that you're learning a lot, Seer. And lastly, we talked about this one already, but we know that this is he, and this is Nichi. In the case of Sunday, like I said, there's alternate readings for a lot of kanji. When we say Sunday, we say Nichiyobi. So the days of the week in Japanese are for Monday, Getsuyobi, Tuesday is Kayobi, Wednesday is Suiyobi, Thursday is Mokuyobi, Friday is Kinyobi, Money Day, Gold Day, Saturday is Doyobi, and Sunday is Nichiyobi. Those are the days of the week. The next thing I want to talk about now, because these are all very, very, very basic terms, like these all relating to the weekdays, I want to make sure that I can sort of relate the words that I talk about to each other in a way that makes sense so that I'm not just throwing out a bunch of random kanji. I want there to be a connection that you can make. Does anybody still need to take notes, or can I move on? Feels like I'm in the school again teaching at work. You know, it's always important to make sure that people who are taking notes don't miss out on copying things down. Alright. So the next thing I want to write about, and you'll probably be able to infer what these mean based on how I position everything. Because these are positional words. So I'm going to write. My stroke order is probably really wrong. Yeah, I really don't like when teachers do that. I think it's very unhelpful if you don't try to accommodate to students who still are making the active effort to learn. I think it's something that some teachers really think that they have to go as fast as possible and do things as hard as possible, but I feel like if you're not making sure that your students are learning, is there really a point to you being a teacher? Good evening, Glamour. How are you doing? I'm just scrolling through this list of kanji to make sure I find the right character. I, know how to write this out, but I always am second-guessing myself. Right. Anybody take a guess as to what these kanji are? I kind of separated them really weirdly. That's good to hear. Let me move these around while I let people in the chat take a guess. Good. It's not time, actually. It is up, down, left, and right. And I'm positioning them this way because, you know, sort of like a good visual to know these directions. Let's move all of these aside. And let's talk about these one by one. Right. It looks like a compass. Wait, why did I freeze? So they're directions. So they're not actually north, south, east, and west. Those you learn a little bit later. But I think it's important still visually to understand the distinction between all four of these. You can see up and down look very similar. They have that horizontal line, and the line either stemming up or stemming down. While left and right have that sort of cross shape, and then either this character that looks like e, or this character that looks like ro. Let's talk about the pronunciations and readings here. So this is up, or above. This is down, or below. This is left, and this is right. Let's talk about the readings here. So we'll talk with left and right first, because they don't have as many alternate readings here. So I'm just going to abbreviate this as K and O. K being Kunyomi, or the traditional Japanese reading. O being the traditional Chinese reading, Onnyomi. So the Kunyomi, typically when you say left, when you tell someone to go left, you will say I, da, the. Hirari. Meanwhile, if you're talking about just directions in general, usually this has to do with like compound words, but I've noticed in my studies that a lot of compound words involving left and right still end up using the Kunyomi reading. So I'm just going to put this here for the sake of putting it here. The Onyomi reading is ha. You're right. Just like king. Or sha. Right. So ka or sha. So left side, right side. Here, the Kunyomi reading is going to be migi. Whenever I think about left and right, I don't know how many of you guys like watch a lot of those old Nico Nico Doga MADs where they had like those videos of Kaiba using enemy controller and he would just shout a bunch of directions. But whenever I think about left and right, I always just think of Kaiba shouting out like Hirari, Migi, Migi, A, B, B. Enemy controller. That's always what comes to mind when I think about left and right. That's Migi. And the Onyomi reading is U, E, U, or U. Why am I... because Jisho writes all the Onyomi out in katakana. So it's like throwing me off when I try to write it in hiragana. It's U. That looks like a... let me just erase this. I'm making a mess. It's all turned to shambles. Alright. It is... Let me write this out here. U or U. So that's left and right. Hirari is left, right is migi. And like I said, this is one of the cases where a lot of the compound words that you see for left and right are actually... They use the Kunyomi reading. Like when I learned this recently through Wanikani. This is actually another kanji that we're going to talk about too, and I hope I'm not writing it backwards. Yes, I was going to write it correctly anyway. Why did I doubt myself? This is I, ga, ri. Okay. Or left hand. Similarly, right. Okay, my stroke order is off. This is migite. Migite. Or right hand. This is like one example of seeing a compound word where they're using the Kunyomi instead of the Onyomi. That's left and that's right. Next, we'll talk about up and down, which we also use to represent when things are above or below certain objects. Let me go back. I know like the Onyomi readings, but I just want to make sure I have both readings down. Because there's a lot. This lesson is all vocabulary. And vocab is so hard. Yeah, over and under as well. Let me just do this. Yeah. So, let me actually pull up Jisho right now, because I just want you guys to see this. Let's see if this will show up properly. Chrome. If I pull this up here. Yeah, these things, the directional words have a lot of readings. Let's see, properties. Automatic. Is capturing? Why aren't you capturing? Wait, I think I know what's wrong. Wrong thing. I want you guys to be able to also see, like, exactly how many readings there are. What is happening here? Here we go. There we go. So, that's not what I wanted. If we take a look at above, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 readings. There's 15 different readings for just above. And 1, 2, 3 readings in the Onyomi. We take a look at below. Again, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 below readings, and 2 Onyomi readings. Typically, what I'm going to show here is just the 2 most common readings that I see. When we say above, we say ue. And for down, we say shita. So if you're saying something is above something, on top of something, or something's up there, it's ue, while down is shita. I don't want to spend too much time with the large amount of readings, but that's the most common reading that you'll see for the directions there, up, down, left, and right. I just wanted to cover that because, again, they're common and they're very connected. Like, if you're trying to explain directions, going left, going right, going, I guess if things are like above or below you, like if you're like looking for something in a house, you would say ue or shita. So again, just another set of words that are all connected. For those of you who weren't following at the start, this is going to be a pretty simple one. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. Actually, I might be lying. So I've talked about this in at least 2 other lessons. But let's talk about this again, because why not? People will probably know what I'm writing out here. Let's write these all out. Doing this has actually helped me memorize how to write everything, because you'd think at this point I'd know how to write all the numbers, but sometimes you just forget. 9 and 10. So, what I want to talk about specifically is this. We already know the numbers. It's 1, ichi, 2, ni, 3, san, 4. Let's write this out like this. 4, that is either yon or shi. 5 is go. 6 is roku. Right, that's what I'm actually going to talk about today, right now, here. Is the alternate readings and how they're kind of weird in a lot of different cases. This is 7 is nana. Or ichi. 8 is hachi. 9 is q. Or ku. It's written as either or. And 10 is 2. So these are the numbers, and what I want to talk about today is there are some very, very, very basic terms that I guess because of the history of them, they've kept these words with the readings that they use. Like, we read these out like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But we're going to talk about them as well with their other readings. These readings, I believe, for the most part, are Onyomi readings. 1 is ichi, 2 is ni, 3 is san. And I'm going to focus on these 3 first. I don't want to go over the whole 1 through 10 because that's a lot to go over in one day. And I just want to sort of introduce that concept of seeing the alternate readings for like very, very, very basic terms like these numbers here. I didn't delete it. Actually, we'll do it with the first 4. I think that's fine. So now let's do this. Let's spread these out a little bit. I want to talk about the different readings that we can apply here. 4 is good. Ni. We'll talk about their Kunyomi readings as well. Or their Onyomis. No, yeah, they're Kunyomi. San, and then Yon or Shi. Because when we count normally, the only ones that are like typically that you really usually see changed around every so often are 4 and 7, with Yon and Shi being changed around because I guess that whole superstition about it being the same pronunciation as death, so they want to avoid that. So all these top ones, I'm gonna label them as K. As On. So like Ichi. That's the original Chinese reading. That's Onnyomi. Ni is Onnyomi. San, again, that traditional Chinese reading. And then 4, actually, Shi, this is the Onnyomi reading. This is the traditional Chinese reading, while Yon, this is Kunyomi. Right, this is for counting. So if you were to count based on the original Chinese pronunciation, ich, ni, san, shi, go, roku, you're using, typically they count using that Onnyomi, that original Chinese version. But you'll see, there's a lot of different words where you're not going to use like ichi, ni, san, or shi as 1 through 4. For example, we talked about this before. Well, let's talk about this. Again, someone remind me what this kanji is in the middle. Person. The Kunyomi reading for this is Hito. While the original Chinese reading, the Onnyomi, is Jin or Nin. Either or, and you'll see that this also pops up a lot. Jin or Nin. So let's talk about this in regards to 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, and 4 person. If I say this is actually more commonly, instead of just saying 1 person, this is actually alone. Oh, and actually, let me write this out. The alternate reading for 1 is Ito as well. I don't know why that's the case, but you could see in Japanese there's a lot of overlap in words. A lot of words in kanji have the same reading, so you can see how that can be a little bit of a headache to deal with. But again, it's another case of the more you learn and the more you practice, the more you'll recognize the homophones and the homonyms, and they'll be less of a problem to you as you read and interpret the language. So this here, you can see that the Kunyomi reading is Hito. Here it's Hito as well, and we have these readings like Ichi, Jin, Nin. You'd think, like I said before, I think I said this before, the compound word reading for a lot of compound words, compound kanji, you usually just use the Onnyomi of both of them. So like in this case, it would be Ichijin. And there are cases of this pattern where that's the case. But this specifically, a lot of counting numbers have special cases. And this here is actually Hitori. Some of you may or may not have heard this term. There's the phrase or the term Hitori Bochi, which is all alone. And that is how you spell out Hitori. Just 3 strokes, horizontal line, two curved lines, and that's how you are alone. Similarly, 2. The first reading, the Onnyomi reading for 2 is ni, while the Kunyomi is uta. I'm gonna regret that one, writing that on the board, on the board, but you know, that is just how Japanese is. Just one of those things that someone's gonna say something and I don't want them to say it. Anyway, so when we say 2 people, similarly to the previous term that we looked up, what happened here? Did I just accidentally draw a line? So hitori is alone. Here, like how hito was the kunyomi here, we similarly, 2 people, we say futari. So that's the 2 of us together, 2 people. But usually when you say futari, it's usually like one person to another person saying it's just the 2 of us. At least that's the context that I see it used in a lot. And let me also write this out. Hitori futari. Right. So one person, one alone person is futari. 2 people, or hitori, 2 people is futari. Yeah, both of you, right. Correct. And then, this is where some people will get mad, I think. So one person, hitori. 2 of you, or the 2 people, futari. We have this. And just to give you guys that, this is the similar pattern to the previous ones. 3. The kunyomi is ki. Or no, not ki, sorry. Wait. I hate the GeForce experience opening up when it overlaps with my undo button. The other reading for this is mi. So you'd think, going by this pattern of 2 different terms, hitori, futari, you think this would be like miri or mitori, but no. Watch Naruto, you might actually know what this term is. 3 people. 3 people is san nin. And you can actually see where that comes from. It doesn't really... It actually uses the idea that we usually use. The Onnyomi of both. San nin. San is Onnyomi for 3. Nin is Onnyomi for people, person. So it's san nin. That's the 3 legendary ninja. The 3 san nin. And then, lastly, let's go over this. You just pull this up correctly here. Listen to G, just so I remember. I'm pretty sure it's, yeah. So once we get past 1 and 2, we get yon, nin. This is just yonin. So, counting terms in Japanese, and this is like a big section. When I was first studying the language, there was like this whole section on the website that I was using to study that listed out like every major counting instance and the different ways that you count terms. This is a pain to study. This is like, you learn this when it becomes relevant to what you're reading or looking up. Because there's just so many cases that, like, when it comes up in my studies, I'll learn it there. Like, if they throw it at you a little bit at a time. Like, when I use Wanikani to study kanji, they do throw the counting numbers at you at a pretty good pace. Like, recently, on the lessons I was on, they were throwing out, like, how to count the number of sheets, like, paper sheets. and the ways that the numbers like 1 through 10 are adjusted that way. And then a few levels later, they would throw at me like how to count the number of books that like someone is holding. So there's a lot of different concepts that you have to like think about here. Because for us, it's just 1 book, 2 book, 3 book, 4 book, 1 sheet, 2 sheet, 3 sheet, 4 sheet. But in Japanese, the way that they connect their numbers with other terms makes it a little difficult to have some sort of consistency with that. So let's see what we can go through next here. Let me see if there's another good jumping point from here. Yeah, counters are evil. They're awful. Alright, let me just get a drink. A little sip first. Alright. So, I mentioned this before. This one's going to be pretty brief, actually. Let's review with the class again, see if you remember from the start of the class what we talked about here. Who knows what this is? And also what this is. Who remembers what these are? Numbers are very hard. Japanese makes it even harder, honestly. So if you guys remember from the start of class, we have the sun and the moon. Or alternatively, day and month. Very good. And obviously, if we have day and month, we should also talk about year. So we know that day is hi. We know that month is tsuki. Though when we talk about it in terms of month, we usually use getsu or gatsu. Let me write these readings out too, just so we remember. Nichi. Or also jitsu. And here we have gatsu. Or getsu. I just realized now that the last time I wrote this out, I did the katakana version of ge. Getsu. And year is written out as hoshi. Or when we talk about it like when we talk about the next year or the year before, whenever we talk about it in proximity to us, we usually end up using nen. Yes. I forgot how to write ne for a second. Thank you. So, let's talk about some examples about this. I'm going to talk about it with year, and just how a lot of it, again, is just vocab, vocab, vocab. Just practice, review. A lot of people, when you study Japanese and study kanji, they'll tell you to download like Wanikani or Anki and practice your flashcards, but it is really important, because the more you see these terms, these words, the more you'll get a hang for just reading kanji and knowing their readings before you even actually look them up specifically. And yeah, a lot of times nen has to do with like when you say like last year, next year, this year, nen is the version of year that you use. For example, I say this. This here. Actually, I might as well do it with all these terms. This is rai nen. Rainen. And this means next year. If I were to write out same kanji, you could probably interpret what this means or have an idea of what this represents just by seeing these vocab words here. Daigetsu. This is next month. And next day really just means tomorrow, and that's just not going to follow the pattern because you know how these things are. Just to show some examples of compound words here, we have ashita, tomorrow. I just want to throw some more examples of vocab words and how they sort of blend with the kanji. So you can see here this prefix here, raigetsu, rainen. That rai as a prefix typically means next. More specifically, it's used as, yeah, it's just next, coming, like the future. And that's actually one of the two kanji used in the term future, which is mirai. So again, using that same reading but in a different position. Here as a prefix, it's raigetsu, and that's just next month, but mirai, future, rai comes second, and that's just... I'm not a professional at Japanese, but I know that if you've combined two words with meanings that relate to something vaguely to English, you could probably guess what that meaning is. So the next term I wanted to talk about is just make sure I remember it, because this one's one that I learned from Wanikani, and I thought it was interesting that this happened with the vocabulary. Yeah. So there is this vocabulary word, which uses two kanji that we actually already learned. It is this. So it uses the kanji for year and then above. So there's a couple of ways that you could probably interpret this. I wonder if anyone has an idea for that. We have year and then above. What would one interpret from year above? The reading for this, unlike how we had nen here, you'd think this would be like nenjo or nenue, but this is read as... that's wrong. This is actually read as Hoshi Ue. And what this means, older. Referring to someone who is older than you, Toshi Ue, they're a year above you. We don't know how many years, but they're older than you. They have their years above you. Similarly, if that's older, you should be able to take a guess as to what this means. And this is Toshi Ita. Yes. So it means year below. Toshi Ita, or younger. So that's what that means. That's just to show some relation between the kanji and some examples of some basic terms, some early terms that you would learn like at that level. I hope it wasn't anything too confusing, and if any of you guys were confused, I'd love if you let me know. I'd love if you let me know if there's like anything I could do to improve, or if you think that there's something that needs to be clarified. I'm always open to criticism like that. And I think this is a pretty good stopping point. We talked about a couple of good topics. We talked about the days of the week. We talked about directions. We talked about numbers. And I think what I wanted to do most was sort of introduce readings to kanji and sort of see like how it sort of builds on itself. If you start with the basics, if you start with like Anki, if you start with like Wanikani and just learn the kanji, it's a little bit slow because the way apps like those work, they make you learn it first and then they make you wait like 3 hours before you get to review it again, just to sort of give it time for you to have it sit in your memory. But if you are interested in learning, I do like going over these kanjis. I think it's really cool to be able to sort of explain these in words, and I think as we go further into more vocabulary, it'll be pretty neat to sort of see how everything sort of comes together. I always am fascinated when I learn new words and sort of see how essentially like they come to those conclusions. I want to actually see if I can pull up any words that I'm learning recently, because I think it's pretty cool to sort of be able to relate the concepts and see like how they say certain topics or words and how it relates. Essentially how like we can translate it to their words here. Like let's go over this actually. This one's gonna be pretty interesting. So here this isn't gonna be restricted to first grade kanji right now. This is just me throwing out some things to show as examples here. I'm not expecting this to be like in your notes or anything, but rather just something I'm doing just because, to talk about this stuff. Let's say this. Actually, I'm going to type this into Jisho. Let's say I like this one. So the word I'm going to give you here and I'm going to explain what these kanji mean. So essentially what you're going to have to do here, or you're going to see here, is sort of how they connect to the words that they mean. What this is the kanji for silver. This is the kanji for to go, or going. I guess travel, kind of, but it means going. So I think this one's pretty interesting. So this is silver and go, and also pronounced... What is happening? This is ginko. And this one's kind of weird. Traveling to money, traveling to silver. This is the bank. Ginko e ikimasu would mean I'm going to the bank. Look at some other examples here. Let's see. This one's actually going to be pretty simple, I think. I think this one's a pretty good one. And it's also part of a title of a pretty popular song. Let's say this one. This means all or everything. And this means power. And it's written as Zenryoku. So if I'm saying all and then power, I think that's a pretty simple interpretation there. You have the kanji for everything, the kanji for power, Zenryoku. What this translates to is full power. There's a song that I really like from, I don't know if anyone here has played it, Osu Tatake Oendan 2. The first song you play is actually called Zenryoku Shonen, or Full Powered Boy. It's a pretty good song. I'm a fan of it. I think that's more or less all I want to go over right now. I think I plan on doing this every couple of weeks as a sort of departure from the grammar lessons. I know it can be a little overwhelming to go week by week by week, and people need to catch up and watch the VOD sometimes, I think. I think it's hard when people are kind of just jumping in and I'm talking about verb conjugation or throwing 4 different particles when they haven't seen any of the other previous videos and might not have any experience. So if this is your first time here and you haven't really seen any of the other lessons, in Twitch, in my About page, there is a link to my YouTube channel, and I upload everything that I do on Twitch there. So even though the Twitch VODs expire, You can watch all my lessons from the start to now if you're interested in sort of getting a review for where we've been so far. So that's really, I think, all I have to talk about today. I think next week we're going to get back into the grammar lessons. We're going to go into word order for real this time. And that's it. I hope you all have a wonderful night. And I thank you all for coming. That's it. Class is dismissed.